Okay, hi guys. So I think some of you do know me, but my name is Sean Kelly, and I'm the Senior Project Officer on the Connecting Nature project in Glasgow. And today we're going to have a look at nature-based solutions and some of the key components as we see it for upscaling nature-based solutions at a citywide level. So the agenda, I'll just quickly run through this. We're going to have a look at nature-based solutions, the definition, first of all, because there's a bit of a discussion around that, an ongoing discussion around that, but we'll look at what the working definition is for us. I'll give a bit of background on the Connecting Nature project and Glasgow's open space strategy exemplar. And then we're going to look at the nature-based solution framework that's being produced at the moment by Connecting Nature. We'll take a slightly different perspective on nature-based solutions today, because I think quite often nature-based solutions, we look at the kind of shiny examples, but today we're going to look at some of the key components behind project and strategy design around them. And we'll do that by looking at some local and international examples that I've been involved in, either directly or indirectly. And then I think at the end, we'll take a broader look at nature-based solutions, what the current issues are and what the potential is for them. And then hopefully we'll have some time for discussion afterwards. Nature-based solutions, a working definition. Now we are an EU Horizon 2020 project, and so we are using the European Commission's definition of nature-based solutions. And up until recently, that was solutions that were inspired and supported by nature, which are cost-effective, simultaneously provide environmental, social and economic benefits that help to build resilience. But actually, as of the end of last year, the EU have now updated their definition to shift the emphasis onto biodiversity. And actually, they went as far as to say that any approaches that do not improve biodiversity and are not based or delivering on a range of ecosystem services are not nature-based solutions, which is quite interesting because I'd imagine it's had quite an impact on some projects. And also it seems to be moving in the direction of the IUCN's definition, which has always had an emphasis on biodiversity and well-being. So it's good in a way. Typologies, I'm not going to go into those in detail at the moment, largely because we don't have enough time, but just be aware that as part of within the literature, there have been 3 different types of nature-based solutions identified. We'll be focusing on type 3 because that is the type that we look at mostly in the project that I work on, and type 3 is focused on greening cities. So that's using nature but in a more artificial way to develop ecosystem services. Typologies are determined by the level of engineering involved, the stakeholder groups who are involved, and the number of ecosystem services that the nature-based solution provides. Okay, so a little bit of background then on Connecting Nature and Glasgow's open space strategy. As mentioned, we're a EU Horizon 2020 project on research and innovation for upscaling nature-based solutions. The project's been running since 2017 and we've got a couple of years left. It will end in 2022. Glasgow is actually a front runner city in the project, along with our partner cities, Genk in Belgium and Poznan in Poland. But we also have 8 fast follower cities throughout Europe, and we have a number of academic partners as well. In Glasgow, we've decided to take on a project partner, and I'm sure some of you will be aware or familiar with Green Space Scotland. They're our project partner, and they help us largely with engagement activities. The open space strategy then in Glasgow is our exemplar. That's because it's seen as a strategic city-scale mechanism for upscaling nature-based solutions across the city. And just briefly, the open space strategy was adopted in February this year. So we're at a crucial point. The strategy aims to protect and inform multifunctional open spaces across the city. Now, the strategy was already being produced by Glasgow City Council. So Connecting Nature are here basically to add value to that. And we're doing that by monitoring and developing a whole suite of indicators. We're supporting a number of demonstrator projects on the ground, and we will be developing a finance, business and entrepreneurship strategy around the open space strategy itself as well. But fundamentally, the main output that we will be producing will be an interactive spatial mapping tool. Now the map there you can see on your screen is a static map, which is pretty standard for all open space strategies in Scotland. But the map that we're going to produce is going to be multi-dimensional and interactive, and will be all singing, all dancing. And I'm hoping to launch a prototype of that some point early next year, so keep an eye out for that. Now, this is the framework, and don't be too alarmed by this figure, because I get that it's quite confusing to look at. This was an early version, and we've since developed this into a much more streamlined version, but it's not quite finished yet, and I'm not at liberty to share it just now. But for the purposes of today, this kind of highlights the main components as we see it that you need to develop nature-based solution strategies and projects and upscale them across the city. It basically looks at the project mechanics, the things that sit behind a nature-based solution project. So we'll look at some of these through the prism of case studies for some of the aspects, but not all of them. That's partly because we haven't got the time to go through them all today, but also because in Glasgow we haven't actually yet developed some aspects of this. So we will look at some technical solutions that I've been involved in. We'll look at the indicators and the importance around those. We'll also look at governance models that we have experience of, and we'll also look at entrepreneurship. Our partner city, Genk in Belgium, are developing an entrepreneurship strategy around nature-based solutions, which is quite interesting. So we'll take a quick look at that as well. Now, that's not to say that these other components like finance and business modelling are not important. Of course, they're crucial as well. We're working hard on that just now, and we'll be able to update later. If any questions, I'm happy to answer later on those. Co-production, I think it goes without saying that any strategy or project these days needs to be co-produced. There's obviously various ways in which you can do that, but we won't go into that today either. Reflexive monitoring is something else we're not going to go into today. Some of you might be aware of reflexive monitoring. I wasn't before this. It's I think it's more of an academic concept, but starting to get my head around it now. It was quite confusing to begin with, but basically it offers a dynamic way of learning as you go on a project. It allows us an opportunity to identify critical turning points in the project and gives us a channel direct to academic support on a monthly basis. So it's useful, it's an important part of the framework, but we won't be looking at it today in detail. Again, happy to answer any questions about it later though. So technical solutions is the first key component that we will look at. And these are two examples that I've been directly and indirectly involved in. The first is a project that I was indirectly involved in last year when I was on a nature-based solutions summer school, very lucky enough to attend a summer school in the city of Hania on the island of Crete in Greece. It was a great week. This was a hypothetical example, and as part of the summer school, we were asked to look at a number of potential nature-based solution projects that could be undertaken in the city to deal with some real issues. So in Crete, they're experiencing some extreme weather in relation to a hotter climate, but also actually in the winter in relation to a higher rate of storms, more ferocious storms as well. So in the map there, I think hopefully you can see that, but on the top of the map is the old town of the city. As you'd imagine, it carries historic status, has quite a narrow historic street layout as well. There's a strong sense of built environment character, but also a strong sense of community character as well. As you'd expect, there's a lack of shade in lots of parts of the area. There's poor opportunity for biodiversity given how built up and dense it is, and also there's a stressed water management system. So in the group that I was working in, we decided that the best and most cost-effective way of dealing with the solution, or starting to deal with this issue, was an urban greening solution. So we looked at designing a strategy that would in place green trellises, flower pots, window boxes, vines and growing spaces. And the main benefits derived from those would be local food production, water management, and carbon sequestration, whilst also respecting the character. So that was the added complexity. There was the historic character and how introducing a new concept like nature-based solutions could impact on that. And actually, the local authority were part of the summer school as well, and had said to us afterwards that they had actually started developing a similar sort of strategy. So we weren't too far off the mark with our hypothetical solution. The second example is a project I was involved in 2013 and in 2015, and it was favela restoration. This particular example was from the city of Florianópolis in southern Brazil. Basically, favelas are slums, obviously, and are very densely constructed very densely on the sides of hills quite often. Due to climate change, wetter climate, there was a higher rate of landslides, which you can see in the image there was causing devastation. Because of the density, it was a very difficult issue to overcome. There's not much room really for planting trees or gardens. And of course, people, there's not that many resources to make use of. So when I was there, I was doing various projects over Brazil. This was one we spent 5-6 days working on. It was part of a charrette process, sort of, where we worked with the local university and the local residents, obviously, and us as the project team. The solution that we come up with was actually based on a solution that had been used in Rio just a couple of years before, which was basically about planting native species, but growing them in nearby nurseries first of all, to get them to a point where we know that they would be able to take off, and that then would help provide stability in the ground, prevent erosion, and had multiple benefits. And you can see in the table there some of the summary of some of those benefits that we had. So that was an interesting one. The picture below was when we went back in 2015, and it's not the best picture, but that was an example of some of the planting that was done in front of somebody's home. So that was technical solutions. The next key components we're going to look at are governance and indicators assessments. Governance, a bit of a dry subject maybe to some, but I think crucial all the same. I think it's important to have all the key stakeholders there on board at the beginning. Quite often it's good to have an anchor organisation involved. We had that in Bellahouston. Sorry, I should have said these two examples are local to Glasgow. Bellahouston Walled Garden and Grow Chapel is a project, one of our demonstrators that we are at an early stage in the implementation at the moment. It's paused because of COVID, but it's happening nonetheless, which is good. So yeah, anchor organisation is good. Another approach that we take is a steering group approach, pretty standard, but I think it's key. It's important to have a steering group approach because you then get the views of everyone involved. In Grow Chapel in particular, we're starting to develop some subcommittees. We've held a number of events, highlighted a couple of issues around project development, particularly in relation to governance, sustainability and operational finance. And so we're developing subcommittees around them to look at those. This, as I said, gives shared responsibility, which is great. But some of the latest research coming out of the Connected Nature project actually suggests that although quite often with projects like this, the aspiration might be to be a community-led governance approach, actually the most successful and sustainable long-term projects do involve local government and third sector involvement as well. So I think it's important to factor that in and plan for that. So that's what we're trying to do, whilst also reducing responsibility on the council. So the next part then is indicator assessment, and I think this is quite often overlooked, particularly in relation to Bellahouston. The project was set up a number of years ago. Anecdotally, local organisations such as Police Scotland were noting that there was a reduction in antisocial behaviour, a reduction in call-outs because of mental health issues. But there was no firm actual empirical evidence around that. So one of the things that we're doing with Grow Chapel is setting out a set of unique indicators that will look at these things at the beginning, so we can monitor them going forward in the project. And the aim then would be that we'd be able to have a strong and robust evidence base when we go to replicate these sorts of projects in other parts of the city, fundamentally to attract funding and political support as well. So indicators maybe are not always considered, possibly because of resourcing, but fundamental, I think, and good for measuring success and learning from failures as well. So the final component that we'll look at is entrepreneurship, and I mentioned that before. Again, something that might not necessarily be thought about straight away when thinking about nature-based solutions, strategies and projects, but there's a lot of opportunity, particularly for local entrepreneurship activities. So Genk are at an early stage now in developing an entrepreneurship strategy. This strategy is focused around the Steimer deal, and the map there in front of you is actually of the Steimer Valley, which is a geographical location in the city of Genk where this project is focused. The deal basically, the Steimer deals basically involve local business owners or community groups and setting up a deal or an agreement with Genk, the local organisation, where they will provide certain support and a platform for local businesses, as long as the local businesses are producing local produce and selling that in local networks. So the key point here is branding, because the city of Genk actually employed an external consultant to do quite a good branding exercise for them, and the message got out across the valley. And actually what's happened is, even pre-launch, they've been approached by local business owners to ask for support and to set up these cyber deals. And bearing in mind that it's not necessarily financial. In fact, the 3 examples that have happened so far haven't been about financial support. It's been really about the branding. And so far, we've got Steimer Honey, Steimer Hops for beer, which is great, and Steimer Ice Cream, although I'm not quite sure how the ice cream is a nature-based solution. I don't know, maybe it's a dairy products or something like that. So yeah, they're at an early stage, but it's a good example, and I think it's important to highlight that. Those are as we see it at the moment, the kind of key components when it comes to a framework around upskilling nature-based solution strategies across at a city level. But I think it's important to consider some of the main issues that we face around that, and not to hide away from those as well, but also to end the presentation on a positive note by looking at some of the potentials as I see it. So the current issues, I mean, we've just looked at the framework there and all the different components that are involved in that, but I do have to say that I have yet to come across a perfect example that considers all those things well. But we're at an early stage, so that's okay, I suppose. Quite often I ask myself, how is it different? Nature-based solutions has been criticised maybe for being just a different badge on things that we've already been doing, and that's partly true, although I hope that the framework displays that there is more to it than that. As I said, we're at an early stage. There's a lack of a universal definition, which for me is a big issue. It leads to mixed messages at different levels, potentially apathy as well. There's obviously risks in relation to financial and technical barriers and unsustainable governance models. We've looked at some of those in the examples I've given. Nature-based solutions doesn't always translate well into other languages. Now, excuse my bad Spanish here. I am learning Spanish, but at a very early stage myself. Soluciones basadas en la naturaleza, which is, I think, how you translate it into Spanish. And when we were in Malaga last year, one of our partner cities there highlighted this, and was like, we have to put up the solution because this isn't transferable really into Spanish, which is a big problem. So people are looking at that just now. And I think largely related to all those issues, lack of definition and transferable concepts, etc., there is a lack of political and industry buy-in at this point. But again, I suppose, that's largely okay, because one of the reasons why we have Horizon 2020 projects looking into this is to, highlight these issues and work our ways around them, so that when practitioners come to use them in a more, or there's a higher prevalence of nature-based solutions, that we'll have these things sorted, hopefully, as far as we can. So the potential, I wanted to end on a bit of positive. So there's the obvious social, environmental, and economic benefits, and we've looked at some of those with the technical solutions that I discussed today. But also nature-based solutions have the potential to empower local communities to upscale across a whole range of different areas, and could act as a way for local communities or businesses to take ownership of the local area. I think nature-based solutions, and I'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute, but it kind of goes hand in hand with any emerging green economy, the climate agenda, looking at green infrastructure, perhaps using less man-made engineered solutions. And also has the potential, fundamentally, I think this is a key point, to combine social, economic, environmental public policy that will then hopefully lead to a stronger thread through things like community planning, public health, town planning, and economic policy, that then hopefully should reduce silo working practices, both at local and national level, which then in turn would lead to strengthening policy making, decision making, and ultimately our public institutions as well. Now I'm a planner by profession, so I thought it was worth just highlighting how I see it from the planning community. I think the nature-based solutions offer potentially a positive approach to development planning in the future, particularly local place plans. As we know, they are going to be coming into practice pretty soon as part of the new Planning Act. Obviously, open space strategies, that's our exemplar, so I think there's lots of opportunities there. There's a really good link connection there. And also I think overall that if planning can get behind the nature-based solutions concept, it offers us an opportunity to lead in some of the things I just described there, in terms of creating a thread, a policy thread through some of those different areas. And just to end as well, this is a bit of an afterthought. I listened recently to this year's Sir Patrick Geddes lecture by the RTPI, and this year it was given by Dr. Catherine Trebeck from the Wellbeing Economic Alliance. It was really interesting. If you haven't listened to it, I'd highly recommend jumping onto YouTube and listen to it. There's a link on my Twitter, which I'll share in a minute. And I think that I took this snapshot from the presentation, which is what Karen believes to be the core elements of any emerging well-being economy. And if you look at those, I would argue that there are definite synergies there with the aspirations around nature-based solutions in a broader sense. So I would say that now is the time to progress that. There's a lot of chat around that, particularly coming out of COVID and the recovery that we're going to be looking at. It's not just about building schools, Boris. I think that we need to look much more broader than that, and I hope that we do here in Scotland. Basically, the more that we use nature instead of man-made engineering solutions, the more we learn the potential that nature has, and obviously the co-benefits that come from that. So just to conclude then, nature-based solutions, I would say, is very much a work still in progress, as you can see, but that's okay. We're working hard to develop research and innovation around them, but I think it could potentially be win-win, particularly if we get it right around public policy making and reducing silo working, etc. So yeah, there's my Twitter there if you wanted to go and have a look at the Sir Patrick Geddes lecture. Thanks guys, cheers.